The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
The following program is closed captioned for the thinking impaired.
By tomorrow, I will rule the world!
You think he's gone? He's not gone. That's the whole point. He's never gone.
Is this some radical new therapy?
You see?
Well, I must have not been paying attention when you were just talking to me. Do you think that you could repeat the question and I listen more attentively? There must have been something in all of that.
1 minute.
That wasn't quite so easy to see. And I must have missed something when you were just talking to me.
I get you upset.
I must have not been paying attention when you were busy slamming the door.
Alrighty. Let's try and get this show on the road, shall we? Thank you, Ben, our fine producer. Hi, how you guys doing? My name's Tom Duggan here with the Paying Attention podcast. Hi atop Two Guys Smoke Shop at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. And as we approach our 4th anniversary, Dave, is it 4th or 3rd? I think it's our 4th anniversary. It could be our 3rd. I went to Lawrence High School. My math is always a little off. Sorry. I keep forgetting twice in a row now, right? Usually we have these three gentlemen, these three chiefs, along with Chief Ryder or Chief Denaro from Haverhill, on the show at the end of the year on our anniversary show to talk about policing. Last year we talked about the opioid crisis, some of the things that were going on. But with all of the things going on in the country with Black Lives Matter, the movement Black Lives Matter, which you see every day now, not as much on cable news, but if you go on the internet, you can see every day they're still rioting in Portland. They're still rioting in certain cities all over the country, attacking police officers. You saw yesterday in New York City, a police, I think it was the deputy chief or one of the chiefs in New York City was attacked on a bridge. It is open season on police officers. And those of us who care about law enforcement, those of us who care about our own safety, even if you don't care about law enforcement, are watching in horror as politicians, mostly Democrats, but politicians of all stripes, are attacking police officers, are encouraging DAs not to punish people that assault police officers, and that are backing this lawless chaos of the Black Lives Matter movement. So I thought we should have, why wait till the end of the year to have these gentlemen on? Let's have the police chiefs on and have them talk about how this is affecting their community, how this is going to affect them moving forward with training and the way they stop people, the way they detain people. So I thought this would, for my regular viewers, my regular listeners on Spreaker and Podbean and all the people that download the audio, I will try to say the names of the chiefs as they're speaking, so that if you're not watching, you know who's talking. So let's just get right into it. I have to my left, to your right of me, I have Methuen Police Chief Joe Solomon, one of the least controversial guys you'll ever meet in your life. There's no controversy with this guy whatsoever. Everyone loves him. Steve Sable loves him. The city council loves him. Everybody loves this guy. I say tongue-in-cheek. We have Chief Solomon here, who had to deal with this Black Lives Matter situation at a council meeting recently. To his left, or your right, we have North Andover Police Chief Chuck Gray, who is the recipient of an Officer Tom Duggan Hero Award. And to his left, to your right, is Lawrence Police Chief Roy Vasque, who might actually get that award if he comes to a bash. He's got to come, though. Like, the thing is, you got to be there to get the award.
You have to pay me.
So we actually had an award for him 2 years ago, and then he left early. And he says, I'm leaving early. I'm like, you can't leave. So I tried to get everybody around him to get him to stay, but he had something he absolutely had to be at. So I thought maybe we would start with, you're watching this as a human being. Forget that you're a cop for a minute. You're watching this on TV. You're watching statues come down. You're watching police stations be burned down. You're watching police officers being ambushed and shot. We had 6 this week, 6 police officers ambushed and shot. How do you guys, just again, forget that you're a cop for a minute. How do you guys, you're all kind of my age or close to my age, growing up in America that actually revered police, that respected police. How do you guys react to the sudden change in the United States among a vast number of people who just outright hate the cops. Whoever wants to go first.
Well, Tom,
Chief Solomon.
I'll go first. So, Joe Solomon. So, Tom, it puts some fear in you. It puts fear in you. Worry about your country. You worry about your brother and sister officers, and you worry about your neighbors and your citizens and your family. There's a lot of fear out there as to what is actually occurring. Everyone has a right to their opinions. Everyone has a right to get out and say what they believe. I think we just have to get back to doing it more peacefully. There's no reason that you can't protest and protest it peacefully. And for a perfect example is the protest that we had in our city. We met with the protester leaders ahead of time. We put phone calls. We put the city government with the mayor, myself, my staff, and the other city employees together. We talked about parameters about what's acceptable and what isn't, and that you don't detract from your message by having anything go crazy. And they said their intent was to be very peaceful. And I give them this. Maybe you don't like some of the rhetoric they say about police, but they have a right to get out there and talk. We were lucky enough that we had a good group that put this together. They even had marshals from their own group who kept the group together, and it was very peaceful. And what I think really struck me with that, separate from listening to the message, was at the end of the rally and everybody marched back, they came back to the location at City Hall and they cleaned up.
Really?
And they cleaned up the bottom.
I've never seen that from any group.
Oh, my God. Let me tell you, from any group, I agree with you 100%. Even if it's just a concert, you see the mess that's left. Their intent was not to leave the place any worse than what it was. They had water for their people. They had medics for their people, even though we had medics. So I have to give them credit that they did a great job and that they got their message out and they did it peacefully. And we just hope that what we're seeing isn't a resurgence of what we saw in the 60s, and that everybody has to listen to the message. Again, I think we all believe we police our community based on what our community wants. So we're listening. You see changes coming. I can say this for my 3 decades in law enforcement. Massachusetts, I think, is unlike other law enforcement around the country. I think we have our act together. We train appropriately. We handle situations appropriately. We listen to our people. Community policing, which we call community engagement, has really come a long way from, if you remember, in the 1995-99 area with Linda Susi speaking for her group in her neighborhood, and you look to how far we've come as engaged, and I know both of these chiefs because I've known them a long time and I see their law enforcement abilities. We lead our police departments the way our residents want to be led. We want to listen to them. I don't have to agree with anyone in what their message is because it's America, but we have a duty to reflect the feelings of our community, and I think we do a wonderful job, and I'm sure both of them would say the same things about their communities.
You know, Theater Chief Gray, as you're watching this, just remove yourself as a police officer for a minute. You're a little younger than the rest of us, but I'm pretty sure you still grew up in an environment in America where police were respected for the most part. We always know there's bad apples, there's bad cops, there's bad doctors, there's bad podcast hosts. I'm one of them. But overall, most police officers, and we knew this growing up, that most police officers were good guys who tried to protect people that went out there and put their lives on the line. As you're watching this, does it scare you for the future of America, for the future of our country, that so many people have so much hatred for the guys that are out there putting their lives on the line to protect them?
It doesn't scare me. I can just it sends a message to me that we need to have more dialogue and find out what's causing their animosity towards us. We had a rally in our town as well that was the same as Chief Solomon said. They met with us. It was peaceful, and they cleaned up after themselves, and their message was sent, and it was exactly what they wanted and exactly what we wanted as far as safety. For whatever reason, I'm not going to take myself out of being a cop because that's what we all do. When I walk down the street with my kids, people still know who I am.
Right. So,
it is what it is, and I'm going to deal with it as a police officer, as a police chief. The whole thing is that there's grievances out there that we know nothing about because we weren't affected by it, either affected personally, someone we know, or something that we're part of, like a movement or something. We don't know everything. We don't have all the facts. Just like the other side doesn't have all the facts on our end as far as how good of a job we think we really do. So it's opened up a lot of dialogue between myself and the officers and the public, like Chief Solomon said. And, you know, I know Chief Vasque will speak to his community as well. It's all about communication. And we need to open the communication up and see what is, you know, open up the hood and see what's going on. And let's see if we can make this work. Because just like Chief Solomon said, we police based on what our community expects. And if they expect a certain level of professionalism, we need to provide that.
All right. And you just hired a bunch of guys, right? Did you just hire?
We just had one officer come out of the academy. He's field training right now, and we're looking to add 2 more in the fall.
And you were going to hire people, but they're cutting your budget, Chief Solomon.
Yes, four of the officers working right now were scheduled to go to the academy this past January. It was pushed off till September, but I still hold out hope that there's a solution to this. And working with the city council and the mayor, we hope not to lose them, but we'll lose 10 positions, 8 physical bodies too that we won't be able to fill if it goes through.
Chief Vasque from Lawrence Police Chief Vasque, you had a little bit of a different situation in Lawrence. They had the Black Lives Matter rally, and they said that they were going to be marching up into Methuen. They were going to be marching into Salem, New Hampshire, which didn't happen. How do you? I want you to answer the same question that they answered. Obviously, like watching all the stuff on TV, how do you feel about that? But additionally, you had your guys were ready. Like you cordoned off a block or so around the police station. There was almost no violence. There was one guy that got out of line. One of the homeless guys that we feed on the Wednesday nights threw a bottle at you guys or something. But it must have been very disconcerting knowing that you were going to have, after 3 full weeks of violence from Black Lives Matter protests, that these guys were going to be coming into Lawrence.
Well, I would say that it's not all under the umbrella of the Black Lives Matter, and I think that I don't want to speak for them, but I know that I've heard a lot of things said that, you know, Black Lives Matter, there's a lot of groups that are taking advantage of the situation, if you will, in that obviously they have their movement, they have their voice, they have their opportunity to file their grievances as they should. So I don't blame them for that. But I do think there are a lot of groups that we could talk about all day long that are taking advantage of that situation and trying to foster their own agenda, if you will. So I don't blame that one individual group, and they, to my knowledge, weren't the ones organizing our event. They were another group just in support of the Black Lives Movement. I think a lot of that happens in a lot of these different communities. So I certainly can't speak for that group, but I can tell you that this stuff about burning, looting, and marching up to Methuen and Salem and all these other things, we never heard that. I think that's social media type stuff that went on. We certainly did not pass that message on to our residents or to our communities next door to us, Methuen, North Andover, Haverhill, and Andover. So we didn't think any of that was going to happen. We prepared based on the national rhetoric, the national scene, some of those outrageous things that we saw, that protests got out of hand. And again, I don't blame the movement itself versus the people behind the scenes that are taking advantage of those situations and giving the movement a bad name, if you will. To Chief Solomon's point, everybody has the ability and the right to file their grievances, have their voice be heard, and we don't have a problem with that. And we were right there in that philosophy, in that we told everybody that was willing to hear that we welcome you coming here and having your opportunity to meet, be together, and unite under this common cause peacefully. And we don't have a problem with that. We could support you in any way, shape, or form that you need. First and foremost, your safety and the safety of the residents and the business owners. So that was the message that we sent. I thought it was well received. Our protests, there was 2 of them that went off very well. To your point, just one individual, again, has nothing to do with the movement. That's a perfect example, though, of someone else jumping into something that they have no business being involved in. And that gives the movement itself a bad name. So I don't have a problem with anyone that wants to, have their grievances heard. Racism itself is not just a policing matter. We all know it's a worldwide, epidemic matter problem that, quite frankly, I'm amazed that in the greatest country in the world that we're still dealing with racism all of these years, that we can't get past, what we try to teach our officers, which is, deal with the situation at hand, the facts that you have at hand, not the person, not their color, not their religion, not their race, all of those things. I'm just still kind of shocked that, I wasn't raised that way, and that we're still dealing with the very issue of racism in this country. And I think,
do you think is it because that racism is real, that there are real
Sure.
cops out there that are gunning down black men for sport on the police departments?
I don't.
Because that's the way it's framed, right? It's framed that the cops are bad, right? They complain about people labeling and stereotyping people based on color, and then they label and stereotype all the cops based on the actions of four guys in Minneapolis.
To your point, there are good and bad in every profession, and we know that good teachers, good cops, bad lawyers. It's up to us to identify those individuals when we find out that that's happening. Hopefully we get that in the recruiting process. Hopefully we get that in the, in the background checks before we hire them. Hopefully we get that in the academy. Or if there's an incident that comes up, hopefully we can remove them very quickly and get rid of them. But there's good and bad in every profession, and it's not just in law enforcement, but certainly law enforcement has its issues as well. And to the chief's points, we don't have a problem dealing with that. As a matter of fact, and Joe could talk about this more than anyone because he's been around the longest, we've been asking for help in getting rid of bad employees. We're constantly disciplining and trying to fire individuals only to have the process send them right back to us, reduce their suspension, reduce their terminations, and now we're left with them to try to figure out what do we do with this individual, only to have them do it again. Mm-hmm. So we've been asking for this for a long, long time, and it took all of these issues in the nation to finally bring it together where they're now forcing it on us, it looks like, when in reality, I'll speak for the chiefs, we wanted help. We've been asking for help. We've been asking for legislation to change things and give us some tools to try to get rid of people because we don't want to be cast that way as bad police officers. Not all police officers are bad. 99.9% of the cops are doing the right thing day in and day out. They're professional. They care about the community. They're from the community. I'll speak for our community. Our cops are from the community. We're 53% minority majority police department now. So they're from there. They care about the community. They're not going out to try to abuse authority, but we're painted in that brush. We don't want to be unfairly painted in that brush, just like anyone else in the world doesn't want to be painted in that brush. We ask to be judged based on our own individual efforts, and one interaction with a community member at a time is what we're looking for, and I think that's not a lot to ask.
Is part of the problem the fact that you all have a boss to answer to? You guys don't have authority to hire and fire and to discipline without going through a political process, without going through the mayor of Lawrence, the mayor of Methuen, and the board of selectmen in North Andover. Is that part of the problem where you're in charge of a department that you can't control? I say this to the Methuen councilors all the time that complain about Joe. They say he did this, he did that. Well, that's not even, he's not responsible for that. That's the mayor does that. Is that part of the problem, that if you've got a guy, like I remember the Bill Green situation, you tried to get rid of a cop that you thought was bad, and I think twice they put him back on, and then eventually he did something that you were able to fire him for.
I won't speak to any specific case, but in general, I think it's good for the public to know that, and Joe can speak to this, and Chief Gray as well, that our authority as being chiefs, we're able to discipline someone up to 5-day suspension. Beyond that, it goes to the appointing authority, which for us, it's the mayor. I can tell you in my experience that the mayor has always backed me up in terms of whether it's a lengthy suspension for someone or to terminate someone. Mm-hmm. But the process goes beyond the mayors. The process goes beyond the town managers and the civil service department. It goes to civil service. The unions are very powerful. The unions get involved, and before you know it, that suspension or termination is reduced to something else, and now we're back to square one with this individual officer trying to babysit them again. Right. So it puts us in a bad light. We'd love to remove bad police officers because we don't want to be painted with that same brush. Mm-hmm. But we're in a situation that we're dealing with the legislation and the laws and the way they happen. So that's what we've been dealing with.
Have you fired anybody for racism?
No, not.
Has anybody here fired anybody for racism?
No.
So, when we're looking at least at the local level, it doesn't really seem to be the problem that CNN and the news media make it out to be, where there's all these rogue cops out there gunning down black men for sport on every police department in the country, and that there's lack of training, and that there's lack of oversight, and there's lack of supervision.
To Joe's point, he said this very well, is that here in the Northeast and here in the Merrimack Valley, we'll speak specifically to us, and Chief Gray can jump in on this. He knows, he's very involved in training. We feel like we're ahead of the curve. We know what's out there. We're not the South, we're not the Midwest where some of these things have happened. The Northeast traditionally, along with the West, has been a leader in technology and policy and procedure and training and things like that. We spend a lot of money on training. And giving our officers the latest equipment and technology and training, all of those things to be the best that they can be. So we think that we're ahead of the curve, but again, something happens somewhere else. Everybody wants to take a look at the entire picture. We would just wish that they would just look internally here and not overreact to the situation. I don't know if, Chuck, you want to chime in on the training?
I'll jump in on it. The training, I feel, is top notch. And I think, what was it, like 3 or 4 years ago, we started actually training together.
Right.
Active shooter drills. We have in-service at the Methuen Academy where Lawrence and North Andover and Methuen officers, along with other officers from other departments, actually get in a classroom and train together. We've done procedural justice, 2 blocks of that. We've done dealing with the mentally ill. We've done dealing with de-escalation training. And all this training we've given the officers in a classroom setting, so they're not just going online and looking at something. They're actually having dialogue with each other. Hey, I had this situation happen. I know that person, okay, how'd you handle this? Okay, watch out for this person, be careful. Don't talk to them this way, talk to them this way because you get a bad reaction. And by having that in-classroom dialogue, our officers between the 3 departments, I think, are getting such unbelievable training above and beyond what is required.
Right.
And then I've spoken to some legislatures over the last couple of days and showed them firsthand, the last 5 years, we've been doing this all along. And so when they're talking about de-escalation training, that was last year. We've already done that. We're talking about, dealing with the mental illness. That was 2 years ago. We've already done that. Right. Procedural justice and bias-based training. All of us have policies in place, and it's been done.
Right.
So it's almost like if someone just, and again, maybe it's because we don't market ourselves enough. And that's one of the things my manager actually mentioned, and I really agree with her.
That's why I like having you guys here.
It's to market ourselves and let the public know we're doing this stuff already, and we're doing, between the 3 departments here and the ones along with us, are doing a great job, I think.
Chief Gray, the legislature, the Senate passed a anti-cop measure this week. Thank God our 2 senators, Senator Tarr and Senator DeZoglio, voted present on that. They didn't vote yes, at least. I looked through some of the legislation that was passed. It's frightening that they're going to allow your officers to go out there and not have immunity if, God forbid, they have to shoot somebody on duty. What do you guys think about that? Have you looked through any of the legislation that's coming up?
Yep, and again, I was reminded by another state rep that things have to go they have to go with the route, and what starts out here could end up down here. What starts out here could end up here. We have to watch it. We can't just jump to conclusion and, as cops say, oh my God, we can't be having this. Well, again, we have to see the game's being played as far as like how strategy's being done. Let's see what's going on. My only thing that I was questioning is just make sure it's not because of what we've done around here. Because like Chief Vasque and Chief Solomon, we consider ourselves pretty much above the curve. So as long as we know that we're not, having the bullseye on us for something we've done. Because if we did do something, we want to know about it so we can take care of it.
Chief Solomon from Methuen, do all lives matter?
We believe in the sanctity of life, of everybody. And I understand that question was going to come up, and I knew you wouldn't like my answer. But sometimes we put messages out and they're misconstrued. Sometimes we don't do a good job at actually talking about what we're talking about. And the release I put out was more about a movement rather than individual person. So we truly believe in the sanctity of every person's life. We train that way. And I think if you look at the discipline that's come out of our city, you don't see, I say all of ours, you don't see excessive force complaints by the most part. And if there is any, they're investigated immediately. So my statement to that would be, we believe in everybody has the sanctity of life, and we train that way so that we can provide the services needed. And interestingly, when Chief Gray was just talking about the training part, probably 5 or 6 years ago, we saw an issue, and this might help shed some light in a different manner. We saw an issue with a significant amount of calls of individuals, children, adults, that were on the spectrum disorder. So they had spectrum disorder, and they were in different levels in the order. So we received some training, myself and Lieutenant Ayala. We then formulated a training, and then we trained the whole police department on dealing with individuals on the spectrum disorder. We were invited to a conference, a national school safety conference. We were actually presented on that. And those are the things we do extra here in, I believe, in the Northeast. We saw a problem. We understood that sometimes when you get a call, the call isn't what you believe. And several years prior to this, we had a child who was very big, so he looked like an adult, at Marsden's Corner, that major intersection at Pleasant Valley, Howe, and Jackson. And the call was for a man with an Uzi.
Wow.
I was actually around the corner and responded to the scene, and we did what we cops did at the time. We give commands. He's not listening, so we get a louder command, then we give a louder command, and he's not listening to us. And at the end of the Uzi, the orange tip was missing. Now, no one knows it's fake.
Right.
Till a police officer arrived who had experience in that and knew the kid and told us what was going on, which caused us to talk lower, calm down. Luckily, thank God, knock on your glass table, there was no shooting there, because that could have been a legitimate situation when officers use deadly force, and it didn't occur to that, and it leads to reform. So we realize, we have to address that. So yes, we believe in everyone's sanctity of their life, and that was the reason why there was no initial shooting at that point. However, it would have been justified. We always talk about use of force, that sometimes it's lawful, but it's awful. And, although that sounds corny, it's true. Whenever you see a use of force, whether it's an armbar, a taser, a takedown, it looks like sometimes the officers are using force more than what's necessary. But when you break those segments down, you find out it isn't. And that's why I like that we carry body cameras, because then we can go back and it's not the officer's word against the person's view. And again, the two chiefs will tell you, you can interview 8 people right here who all watch the same situation and get 8
different
versions.
stories, yeah.
Or sometimes 10, because they hear it and they change. So let's look at the video and analyze the video for exactly what happened and what it was. Was that actually a remote control or a cell phone that came up and everyone thought it was a weapon and the person pointed and unfortunately a shooting occurred? Rolling into that, I think the benefit we have is we have our own academy in the Merrimack Valley that allows, in fact, both the chiefs sit on the advisory board along with the chief from Amesbury and the chief from Haverhill. So we get some input. In our academy, we do extra weeks. We do a mental health first aid to prevent officers from committing suicide, but also a stress reduction where they learn how to deal with these types of situations that help do the diffusion. What I do like about the bill that you mentioned is post. Police officer stands in training. How long we've been talking about this? 34 years I've been a cop. We've been talking about, can you believe we don't license cops? Go to New Hampshire, commit a violation. They revoke your license. You're done in the United States to be a police officer because you've been decertified. So there is some good things in the bill. I just think they need to listen to us more. They need to listen to the police more. And they need to listen to what should be in there and what shouldn't be in there. Qualified immunity. I just listened to a video outside today of a professor speaking about qualified immunity that said when an officer, if you take the qualified immunity away, when we commit a criminal act and get sued, that the city doesn't have to pay. Well, we know this. If we commit a criminal act right now with qualified immunity, guess what? Qualified immunity doesn't count. You still get sued and you still lose. Qualified immunity says it's the reasonable man standard. If a reasonable police officer in that same position would have done the exact same acts, you acted within the scope of your job, qualified immunity attaches. What's very interesting is take away qualified immunity and I do something totally legitimate, but I get sued and lose. Guess who pays?
You do.
No, the city. The city pays
without qualified immunity?
Yeah, because once you reduce part of that qualified immunity is if it was when you get sued, some of it can be assessed to you, some can be assessed to the city. Most of the cases fall on the city. But qualified immunity isn't being removed from us. It's being removed from all government.
From the municipalities.
So a city engineer looks at this road design for a bridge. He certifies it's perfect. The contractor puts in a defective beam that was, say, outside of the scope. Qualified immunity wouldn't have attached for the company, but would attach for the city because they made based upon their inspections in the plan. Now that means that money falls on the city. I don't think the public realizes you're opening the floodgates because qualified immunity comes in. The judge says, nope, that cop acted outside the scope of his job or committed a criminal offense. No qualified immunity, case moves forward. Then during the motions and during the arguments, the city says, sorry, you're on your own. And they put up the argument that that this person acted outside the scope of their authority or committed an offense, we're out of it. And in most cases, you'll see the judges drop them out and then the officers on that case by themselves. This is going to put us in that quandary where the city or the municipality or the state is going to eat more of that responsibility. So there needs to be some refining there. But we all agree, we've been talking about this for years, we want post, because when the interesting part is now when that officer, say, has his discipline, it goes to post. So say the city says, all right, we're going to fire him, and they get returned by another agency, arbitration or civil service. Post says you're decertified, so although you're returned, you don't want a cop, see you later, you're done. The only problem with post is they made a modification to put it into instead of a post certification, they're putting it into a committee's hands, which would mean the way it's currently read, and again, it's still going to go to the House and it'll go to conference committee and then the governor, it's saying an outside entity has to, right now, investigate all complaints. So you say, I ran into Solomon. Solomon was rude and ignorant. That complaint's now going to go to post. Post is for the very serious violations. Once we've cleared our professional standards investigation, found you responsible of something, then it goes to post, who conducts an analysis and says, you know what, this is so far out of the scope of what that cop should have done, decertified. We've seen, and I've seen, officers here that have left employment to only go become a police officer in another community, whether it's inside of Massachusetts or outside of Massachusetts. So hopefully, the House of Representatives is going to look at this bill, make some more modifications. We're very lucky to have Chief Brian Keyes as the head of the legislative committee for Massachusetts, and he's also an attorney, and he's the chief in Chelsea, very intelligent man. He'll be involved in those conversations for us, and hopefully we get back to post, because we want post. But again, we live in a union community, so we have to abide by those laws.
One of the things that frightened me when the Minneapolis riot started, and then it started to bleed all over the country, is watching police officers who are trained, who have raised their right hand, who have sworn to protect the public, obey orders to stand down while people are being hurt, to obey the orders of mayors across the country who said, don't intervene if someone's getting hurt. And we watched it. We watched police officers stand there while innocent people were being beaten and some killed because they were ordered to stand down. And I grew up in a police family, so I always was under the belief that police officers were legally allowed to not comply with an illegal order. And an illegal order to me would be telling cops not to intervene while someone's getting hurt. This frightens me because it's all over the country. It's not here yet. It's not in the Merrimack Valley yet, but it sure as hell is in Cambridge, and it sure as hell is in Boston. And I want you guys to, I asked Chief Gennaro when he was here, I'm going to ask all of you guys, if you were ordered in a situation like that to stand down and people in your community were getting hurt, would you follow that order or would you betray that order, for lack of a better word? Anybody? Chief Vasque?
I'm not sure where that happened or who was standing down to that. I mean, we have a duty to protect and to serve. I would think that we'd have to carry that out. I don't know how a mayor or a city council or a town manager could tell you as a law enforcement official not to act in accordance with the law. If it's a law or the law is being broken, then you are mandated to act on that law, and especially in the preservation of human life. So I don't see that being a problem here. I'm not sure the circumstances surrounding what happened somewhere else, but I don't see that being a problem here.
Chief Gray, let's say that there's a Black Lives Matter, or maybe some other group is protesting in Methuen and it gets violent, and the town manager or the board of selectmen tell you, stand down, don't engage with them. It's only going to make things worse. Do you follow that order, or do you say no? The law says I've got to. Do you agree with Chief Vasque?
I agree 100% with Chief Vasque, and what it comes down to is that we don't have the facts on what happened when those officers were allegedly told to stand down. We don't know what happened. Anytime anything bad happens, like a school shooting or something, I always wait for the official report to come out. I don't listen to the press. I don't listen to the media. I don't listen to the hearsay. And until we find out what really happened there, to me, it didn't happen.
Right.
And police
officers, we know in New York, because de Blasio has admitted that he has told his officers to stand down in a lot of different situations, and now we see cops in New York being ambushed.
And again, I hear what I hear, but I'm going to repeat what Chief Vasque said: is we're sworn to uphold the law, and if someone's getting beat up, not only am I going to intervene, I'll go myself and intervene, because that's what we do.
Chief?
I agree with both of them. And
let's say Chief. Let's say Mayor Perry comes in and says, "You know what? I've found religion now, and now I'm a pacifist, and there's a riot going on. Chief, we don't want you to engage with any of those people, and your guys are standing there, and innocent people are they're dragged out of their cars and beaten up. Do you defy that order?"
First, I don't think Mayor Perry would ever give that.
I don't think so either.
Right, because even with all the dealings we've had, he leaves the decision of department heads to the department heads.
Right.
He wants us to make our own decisions. But here's where I would not comply with an order like that, and we do that at the risk of what the ramifications to ours. So that's okay. We'll do what we do. You take the action against us. But we have a little bit of difference in the law, at least in Massachusetts, because we're autonomous. So the law gives a police chief and the fire chief the autonomy over their personnel, their equipment, and their manpower. So yes, you can give me the order, but I'm not required to follow your order. Now, I might lose my job.
Right.
I've been there. So again, we do what we have to do, and we deal with the ramifications afterwards. We would not comply with an order that said allow an innocent individual or even someone committing a crime to be hurt. We're not going to do that. Again, the sanctity of human life, the service and protection, which I think kind of in law enforcement, if you look in the community policing era, 95 to 2005, when you said protect and serve, it was a bad thing. People are like, whoa, we don't want to talk about protect and serve. We want to talk about community engagement. But it's the same thing, because at the core, what we do is what good is outreach if we're not keeping you safe? So maybe it's just a different way of saying it. No, we wouldn't comply with the order. We would do what needed to do to keep everybody safe. And sometimes that means we call each other. We do this routinely. We call each other and say, hey, we got something unfolding. I need some advice, and can you get over here right now and help me? We've all done that, regardless of what happened. And go back to the gas explosion. Chiefs came from everywhere to help. Chief Vasque made a call, Chief Gray made a call, and Chief Keefe made a call. And people, not only do the people come, but the chiefs come, and they say, you go do this, you go do this. We don't ask, well, I'm not taking orders from you. We're there to help each other. I truly believe you have synergy in the Merrimack Valley. We always talk about, like, we're one police department in the Merrimack Valley. We think alike. By the way, someone who's in Lawrence or North Andover, Andover, Methuen, where do you think they are all day? They're in all our communities, including Haverhill. Haverhill, interestingly, was almost like that old island. Chief De Niro made the change. You look at chiefs prior to that during my tenure, when you got to the line on 110, you didn't go with the Haverhill. Right. Now we have that comfortableness, and I think it's about us meeting and working together, training together, that we're all one. And quite frankly, for me, I'm in the triangle, the Lawrence, Lowell, Haverhill triangle, so I get a lot of activity in my community. And we did something in mid-90s, so it was between 95 and 99. I used that time frame because that's when I was assigned to the community policing division, where Lawrence police officers and Lowell police officers came to Methuen, because we had identified our residents were traveling back and forth. A Lowell cruiser and a Lawrence cruiser in Methuen with Methuen cops and those cops in it patrolling. Then we went to Lawrence, but we drove in the Methuen and Lowell cruisers in Lawrence. Then when we went to Lowell, we drove in the Lawrence cruisers and Methuen cruisers. You'd see someone say, hey, I know who you are. And they'd be like, oh, the anonymity's gone. But that's part of the cohesion you have to have in law enforcement. And quite frankly, from the traveling I've done and the training I've done nationally and internationally, I don't think you see that in other parts of the country. I think not only is it a Massachusetts thing, but I think the Merrimack Valley, I mean, we're brothers and sisters, and we see each other, we call each other. You probably can't find a couple of weeks go by that we don't have multiple text or phone calls back and forth with each other, just throwing things back and forth. And that brings me back to the academy again. We sit on a board together. We get to interact. We get to hire the director. We get to go see our own recruits and have some input. We know right away, is there a problem with that recruit? Where you send your recruit to an academy, once a month you get a report. Now we're not getting a report. We are the report. We're there. Our people are there. The North Andover officers, the Lawrence officers, the Methuen officers, the Haverhill officers, the Amesbury officers are actually at the academy training, giving feedback to their departments. So we're getting feedback from day one till graduation day. So Right up to that point, you don't even have a job. You, like all of us, you come to my department, you go through 14 weeks of field training, and then we make a decision as to whether or not we're going to maintain you. Some people say, wow, you spent all that salary, you spent all that training, you're out $65,000. Well, guess what? That's better than out 32 years of a bad employee.
Right. Chief Vasque, have you seen, especially with Lawrence being a little bit higher on the crime scale than of the three communities?
Not anymore.
No, it's Methuen now? Is that what it is? That's only at city council meetings. Have you seen, because of the change, because the media is still so anti-cop and they're stoking the violence all over the country, especially CNN, MSNBC, have you seen a change in the way your officers are being received in the community? Are you seeing more assaults and more resistance to your officers when they're making arrests? F you, you pig, Black Lives Matter, you're only picking on me because I'm black or I'm Latino. Do you see, is it bleeding into your community? Because it seems like all the stuff going on in the rest of the country isn't really here, but I have to imagine that the attitude is here.
A little bit, but I think it always has. You're always going to get your nitwits out there that are going to make those kind of comments. We've heard those catchphrase names, funny names for cops for a million years since we've been kids. So you're always going to get a little bit of those. I'll speak for Lawrence, and I'm sure these guys will say the same. Our community has been great in terms of this whole situation. When the protests were happening, I know we heard from a lot of the residents and business owners who were concerned about Lawrence. We don't want that stuff to happen here, meaning the violence and the looting and burning and things of that nature. So just like Chief Solomon said about the gas crisis, the community really came together. We heard right out the gate when we had the gas crisis that in South Lawrence is all in darkness. Oh my God, we're going to have looting, stabbing, shootings, murders, right? Right. Lawrence is Lawrence, all of that. But there was the exact opposite effect.
Why do you think that is? I know you're in mid-thought, but I couldn't believe when they said they were going to have one in Lawrence. I couldn't believe that was going to go off without any violence, because it was going on every single night. We were turning on CNN every night. We were watching Minneapolis burn. We were watching LA. We were watching St. Louis. And while all that's happening in that environment nationally, they scheduled one in Lawrence, and you didn't have those problems. Why do you think that was? Was it your preparation? Was it your contact with these people, or was it just something else?
So certainly those two things, and we were prepared because we saw the same things you were seeing on TV, the things that were going on there. So you have to prepare. The community expects you to prepare, so you prepare for the worst and you go from there. But certainly our response to the protest was very scaled back, laid back. Let them have their time, and we're just going to be on the outskirts if they need us or if someone else needs us, and we're going to go in that manner, and we'll change our philosophy based on what happens. But I think I like to think that has something to do with it, our interaction with the groups prior to, and then I would like to hope that all the goodwill we've built up in the community over all these months and years, and dropping the crime numbers and going to community meetings and going out to the community, to all these youth organizations and partnering with them at the high school and doing all these birthday parades that we do, and the ice cream truck, and open gyms. And I would like to hope that we fostered a lot of goodwill in our community, and that our community was behind us. And again, we heard from a lot of people, business owners and residents, that said, we don't want that here. That's not Lawrence. What's going on out there is not going on here. And, we don't want it, and we're not going to put up with it. So a lot of people got involved behind the scenes to kind of go after that sort of rhetoric that was out there on social media, where people were just trying to stir things up. And that's why I go back to my original statement about the Black Lives Matter movement, that I don't have a problem with it. And I think a lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes that's attributed to that organization, but I don't think it's them. I think it's a lot of people want to take advantage of situations, and that's what they try to do. When you have a gas crisis, people want to take advantage. They want to loot. When there's a protest, people want to go there just for the looting. It's not about the issue. So I don't blame the movement itself or anyone having a say in their grievances. But I do think that there's a lot of that goes on behind the scenes. People want to capitalize on chaos. People want to capitalize on something else to suit their agenda. So for us, I like to think that we did a lot of homework, if you will, in our work in the community. And I would like to think that carried us a long way. And I'm sure these guys can speak to that as well.
Black Lives Matter, though, is not some benign group. I mean, on their website, they call for the defunding of police.
Sure.
They've marched through the streets of America crying, kill the police. Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. The only good cop is a dead cop. they're calling for, and it is happening across the country in certain areas, police departments being defunded or having their funding cut. Are you worried that's going to come here?
No, I don't, because again, our community is behind us. I don't think some of these problems that have gone on in the South and in the Midwest are not going on here in Massachusetts and the Northeast. Again, I think we're doing our homework. We're ahead of the curve. We're in training and recruitment and policies and procedures and our relationships with our communities. I don't know what's going on over there. I can tell you that some of the things that I've seen, I've been outraged at, and I think we all came out very strongly with what we saw in Minneapolis. As soon as I saw that, I was like, I cannot even believe what I'm seeing. Forget about being a police chief or being a human being, and forget that the individual, George Floyd, was an African-American male. If I saw anybody treating someone like that, I would have been outraged and disgusted. I can't even believe that a police officer would do something like that. I just have to go back to the fact that they don't recruit, train, or hire as well as we do, and they don't take care of their community as well as we do. I hope that we're doing things better here, but certainly that's not us.
If there was a supervisor on the scene at the Minneapolis situation, do you think that would have happened?
I hope not. There was other officers there, and for whatever reason, they decided to act the way they did. But I would hope not. And if he was there, if they were there, and they didn't respond accordingly, they should be fired. Right. Absolutely, no ways about it. I mean, they should have a duty to intervene. And the fact that we have to put a policy in there, forget about the fact that it's common sense. For God's sake, to see something like that going on to a human and you don't interact, you don't get yourself involved in something like that and see that going sideways is beyond me. Forget about being a police officer. I don't even understand it at all.
Chief Gray, you're an expert on training. Since I've met you, I think every conversation we've ever had, you've at least at one point brought up training. You seem like a training guy. Yeah. I want to talk about this. We've got maybe 15, 20 minutes left, and we can go over, right, Ben? A lot of people are under the misimpression, because they don't have cops in their family and they don't experience policing, that they have all these ideas in their head that are just wrong. That you can't shoot an unarmed assailant, that you can't shoot somebody in the back. Can you talk about some of those things? Because whenever I hear CNN or MSNBC and they have their panels and they say, well, the cop shot him in the back, as if that automatically makes it a bad shoot. Well, when we all know that those of us involved in law enforcement know that just because someone's unarmed doesn't mean that they're not putting someone's life in jeopardy, and sometimes you have to shoot. Can you talk about some of those instances? I even had Paul Morano, my former co-host, say to me one day, well, why can't they just shoot them in the leg? Can you address some of those as a training guy?
Right. So I'm gonna do the best I can, because I'm not a use of force expert, but I do try to stay up on it. The standard we use is the reasonable standard, and it's Graham versus Connor, and it's basically what the chief said as far as what would a reasonable officer do in the situation? And it goes on. It's called a force continuum. And what it is basically you go from having a conversation and being interactive to passive resistant, active resistant, volatile, and eventually to the top, which is deadly force. So it's a dynamic thing. And that's what people don't understand. Is it can be very volatile, and then all of a sudden the person can say, "Okay, I give up," put their hands up, and then it becomes right down there. So what people I think need to realize is that we do extensive training on use of force, whether it's through firearms training biannually or whether it's just in roll call. We, just like we do the pursuit policy, because those are the high-risk, low-frequency events that when they go bad, they go real bad. And from a training point of view, every day should be a training day for us, because the more training you have, the more it first of all, boosts the officer's confidence. Secondly, it really educates everyone on how do we play this game right now, as far as what can we do, what can't we do. And finally, it's something that you have policies and procedures, like Chief Vasque said, in place. All right, they're current, they're reasonable, they're clear, they abide by the standards set forth by the Mass Accreditation Council if they fall into that guideline. And if you train on these policies and procedures, those high-risk, low-frequency events that when they go bad cause real tragedy, if you will, those are the ones you prepare for. So by training, you're giving the officers more tools, not tools on their belt per se, but tools in their head to say, how can I handle this? Do I need to pull my firearm out, or can I try to talk to this person and de-escalate this? Because right now, no one's in danger. So again, it's a dynamic situation, up and down, but that's basically what we try to educate.
But shooting someone who's unarmed is not automatically a bad shoot, right? Can you just explain that a little bit? Because I think a lot of people who don't know law enforcement they say, oh, well, he shot the guy, like the guy with the taser, right? Mm-hmm. He was running, and he was shooting the taser from behind while he was running, and the cop shot him while he was running away. And automatically it was they shot him in the back, as if that makes it a bad shoot. And I'm trying to educate people at home that, just because someone was shot in the back doesn't necessarily make it a bad shoot. You can't shoot somebody in the leg. What is the standard for shooting someone?
So the standard of using a firearm is deadly force. And that is when that person is going to commit either kill or violently injure somebody, that it's about to take place. It's imminent. Right. Imminent bodily harm. And so if you're going to use your firearm, it could be, is the person, holding a machete? Okay, are they ready to push someone off a subway platform in front of a train? Again, we don't know for sure. It's subjectivity versus objectivity. I can't just sit here and give a blanket statement because all kinds of facts come into play. Right. But again, what happened, I think that was Atlanta where the person shot the taser. Mm-hmm. We've seen a couple videos and we've formed an opinion based on what we've saw. We haven't seen any reports yet. We haven't seen any coverage of audio, body cameras. We haven't seen any witnesses. So again, to make a statement that he shot the taser, it was deadly force. No, we need to get the totality of the circumstance.
Right. Every situation is different. And that's really, you have TV involved too, which doesn't help us when everybody sees a case solved in 20 minutes on TV. Mm-hmm. And people may, an officer, wing somebody, shooting someone in the leg. First of all, good luck trying to hit somebody in the leg when most cops can't hit somebody in center mass. So that doesn't happen. Warning shots and things like things that we've heard. Think about that for a minute. A warning shot. Where do you think that warning shot's going? Right. You're going to shoot that. That thing's coming down at some point, right? So you got to be realistic, in some of the things that go on. And every case is different. So to Chief Gray's point, you can't just say, can you shoot someone in the back? Yes or no. You can't, because you can't answer that because every case is different. Every case has a little bit different piece of evidence that you need in order to make that decision. And that officer's making that split-second decision. So I think that's what people have to understand too. It's a split-second decision based on what was going on. And because we see one video, we don't necessarily know all the facts. So to try to say yes or no, that was good without the totality of the circumstances is difficult. Can you talk about some of the circumstances that would allow a police officer to shoot an unarmed person? Because a lot of what we hear with the Black Lives Matter movement is X number of people were killed by police and they were unarmed, as if that automatically makes it a bad shoot. Well, again, so just off the top of my head, we don't know all the circumstances. So did the officer think he was armed at the time? Did he have a cell phone that he took out? You hear things like that. Again, it's a split-second decision that an officer's making in the dark, if you will. Again, I'm throwing facts in there because I don't know all the facts. Right. So without knowing each case and knowing each individual fact, it's difficult to say yes or no that you can't. But if you want me to throw out a scenario, I can start making things up to that point. Like, again, it's in the dark. There's a struggle. He's trying to kill him. I mean, I have no idea. He pulls out something that he believes is a weapon that's going to be used against him. There's a number of different factors that we just don't know in each individual case to try to say blanketly yes or no. So it's difficult. And I think, again, going back to, TV and things like that, a lot of things people see on TV think it's, it's reality, and it kind of it plays against us, if you will. Chief Solomon from Methuen. So I guess what I'm hearing from the other chiefs, and hopefully people at home are hearing from the other chiefs, is that just because someone is unarmed and is shot by an officer does not make it a bad shoot automatically. Just because somebody is shot in the back does not necessarily make it a bad shoot. When you're training your officers and these types of issues come up, is there some kind of a standard? Because the public seems to think that there is. Is there some kind of a standard as to shooting someone or using deadly force on duty?
Well, there is, and it's all based on the training and the scenarios. Again, the nuances control that. So is the person doing something that is going to cause somebody to lose their life, cause the officer to lose their life, or have they already taken someone's life or caused such serious injury that the person could die? So those are the different levels and the different steps. You have to actually meet them, but every nuance is different, just like as the Chief Vasque gave you a scenario. So someone starts choking me and I start to pass out. Is he armed? Right. No, but he's employing deadly force. I pull my weapon and I shoot him. I just shot an unarmed individual because I was about, in my mind, to pass out, and then he's going to take my gun and kill me or kill someone else. So there's a multitude of different situations. But something also that the public should be aware of, we train a lot in firearms, but do we realize, and does the public realize, that in national statistics from the FBI, in an active shooter situation, now meaning someone shooting at you or someone has a weapon and you're going to engage them, cops hit 20% of the time is their hit ratio. So if you're going to hit someone 20% of the time because you're dodging, you're moving, they're moving, we can't be trying to shoot arms, legs, or hands. I saw a great movie the other day in one of the police shows, and the guy was up like this, and he was holding the gun to his girlfriend, and it was NCIS, and the NCIS agent with a rifle on top of a building, fired around, shot him in the hand, the gun fell out, and they took him into custody.
Right.
That ain't going to happen. In
Right.
fact, if that shot's being taken, it's being taken by a trained sniper, and it's not in the hand.
And he's aiming for the head. Right.
Because at this point, the person's about to deploy deadly force, and the only way to stop it is a headshot.
Mm-hmm.
And so every single situation is different. But what we do train is we train to hopefully not get into that situation. The goal is to short circuit prior to getting there. And Chief Gray said something very important that I don't think people realize. Just because force is going up doesn't mean it's leading to deadly force. It can be going up and maybe it comes back down. So it's a living situation. It's changing second by second. But I heard so many times people, why didn't you shoot him in the leg? Why can't they shoot him in the hand? Why did they do that?
I wish we could.
Deadly force could be somebody using a car. Now, they are unarmed in people's minds, but they're driving a 2,000 or 3,000 pound weapon. So it all depends on each individual situation.
How difficult is it to educate the public? I brought those two topics up because I think, the stuff that I see on Facebook it just blows my mind. People are so uneducated about what policing is. And how difficult is it when you're out in the community and people are making these judgments that are based on nothing, mm-hmm. and then, God help us, some of them get elected to a city council and they start trying to legislate what they think they know when they absolutely know nothing. I know you dealt with it last night. How frustrating is that? I'm sure it happens in all three communities.
So because I just dealt with this last night, let me say this. On something outside of weapons. We send every police officer through EVOC over 5 years. So emergency vehicle operations. So we want them to learn. You go to the academy, you get 40 hours of EVOC. Do you know in my department how many times you drive again after that in EVOC? When you get in an accident, the chief says, whoa, that's your second accident, send them to EVOC, and you get a day's training. So maybe 8 or 9 years ago, working with the state police, I said, I'd like to split my department in. So every 5 years, everybody, I don't care if you've been here 30 years and been through it 6 times, you're going to go through EVOC again. 1 day of like a retraining, a recertification. EVOC is a lot about mental and breathing control. You have to control what you're seeing and what you're doing. So what do we do all day for 8 hours a day? We drive a car, right? Mm-hmm. For the most part, unless they're on a walking beat. We train 2 or 3 times a year on a firearm, and luckily most officers go through the whole career with never shooting anyone. But we're driving a very seriously heavy-duty vehicle every single day on patrol. And if it's in an emergency call or a pursuit, we're driving that. And I had somebody challenge me on that and said, well, just because no one else is doing, does anyone else do it? I said, in my studies, I don't know anyone else that does unless it's disciplinary. And that person said, well, then I don't think it's necessary. And why are we doing something someone else isn't doing?
Yeah, let's cut that out of the budget.
So here's my opinion. Because we're leading. We have vision. Why did we have body cameras before just about everyone in Massachusetts? We're the first major city to have them. There was 2 small towns in Western Mass that had like a couple of cops and they bought a camera. We're the first department in Massachusetts to have tasers. Why? Because you know what happens when you hit them with a stick? We break things, right? So we did some studies. We said, well, an electronic control weapon is, although it hurts, doesn't have permanent damage in most cases. So we had to go to the Secretary of Public Safety and Attorney General, how many years ago that was, because no one had them and the law prevented them. And we wrote a policy in conjunction with people that know a lot more than I do, and that became for years, and it might still be, the model electronic control policy for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Because we have vision, because we see what's happening in the world and in the country, because we are students of law enforcement. Does that mean we shouldn't be doing something just because everyone else isn't doing it? You know what I say? Everyone else should be doing what we're doing. Don't make me do less because other people aren't. What we should be saying as legislators and leaders, I want my police, when I look at this police department, I want to say they're doing more than the next department, because then you know what the next department does? They do that.
Right.
Then they say, oh, well, that's just standard now. We should be above standard. Let's go do something else. Not for the fact of doing it, but for the fact of making people safer. So that's my argument on that.
Does it frustrate you guys that Massachusetts is such a liberal state, and that the legislature and even the governor in some areas doesn't back the cops. Is that frustrating for you guys? You're out there putting your lives on the line. Even as chiefs, I see you guys. I've seen all three of you guys at scenes. Everybody thinks the chief sits behind a desk and he just deploys guys and answers the phone and does paperwork. But I've seen all three of you guys at major scenes in the Merrimack Valley, and it's got to be frustrating for you. It's got to be.
I don't feel that, Tom. I'll be honest with you. I think that for the most part, we get the tools that we need, the training, the money. I've got nothing but ultimate respect for the governor. I say that not because he's the governor, but because I saw him in action for Columbia Gas 1 and 2, and then through COVID. And I've been around him a lot for his different meetings, and I've been privy to being in the room with him and his leadership at meetings. So I don't feel that in terms of the legislature. Overall, that might be the opinion of some. I'm certainly not happy about the quick reaction to some of this, the bill now, and to the chief's point that I hope that it gets scaled down a bit, and I think it will when people spend a little time talking about it. And that's my hope for the Senate bill that was just passed.
Aren't they going in the wrong direction? Shouldn't they be doing the exact opposite of what they filed? Shouldn't they be giving you guys more funding for more training? For more officers.
And that's a good point. When they talk about defunding the police, but then you turn around and say, we want you to do X, Y, and Z training. Well, how are we going to do that? So, no, I get that. Again, I think that's a quick overreaction to something that happened in a national scene. And again, that's why we try to bring that acumen home. It's not happening here, especially in the Northeast. We're doing X, Y, and Z. One of the good things that did come out of this, when people started asking, well, can we see your policy on use of force? Do you have X, Y, and Z? Yeah, we have that. Oh, you do? Oh, okay. Next question. What about de-escalation? When are you going to start doing that? And to the chief's point, no, we've been doing that for years. Oh, really? Oh, geez. Let me ask you another question. What about this? Do you have a no-choke? Yeah, we've never done that. We have that, and you can't. Oh, okay. Move on.
Right.
So, but I think they're expecting us to be just like everybody else in the Midwest and in the South as examples. I use them only because they've had issues, and there's been some stuff going on there, but. Then they come to find out that we're doing things differently. We don't have all the answers, but I think we adapt well, and I think we're ahead of the curve. I think we're doing, to the chief's point, we're always trying to one-up each other, and I mean that by when someone comes up with a good idea or sees a trend, and Joe's been doing it for a long time, we capitalize on that knowledge. We try to bring it to the next level. We try to think outside the box, forward thinking, and I think we've done that. So I think I think we're in a good place. And I would just hope that they would look at our picture locally versus nationally.
Before I go to Chief Gray, you've been very innovative with putting cameras up all over Lawrence, to the point where civil libertarians like me get very nervous about that kind of stuff.
We've been watching you.
I know you are. In fact, I actually wave at the cameras now when I go through intersections because I know who's watching the cameras. But Chief Solomon's been very innovative as far as getting the body cameras. Is that something Lawrence is looking at doing? I think that really... it can hurt in some situations, but I think overall the good outweighs the bad.
So to your point, we've been trying to get those 2018 now, 2 years, here we go. I actually filed for a grant and was awarded a grant by the government for body cameras. So as Chief Solomon will attest, you have to get it through the unions. You have to develop policy and procedure. We actually got Joe's policy on body cameras. So we are trying to implement that, even if it has to be on a pilot program. The difficulty for us, again, and we talk about post and all these other things, trying to get these things passed that we wanted, is getting it by the union. So we have to deal with that whole issue. We did not have for 5 years a collective bargaining agreement in place. So in order to bring another bargaining issue in place, we couldn't do it without their consent. They didn't want to even talk about the issue because they had all these other issues that they wanted to address in their contract. Thankfully, we now have a contract in place for 7 years, so we have a 2-year buffer to try to get something done. And we're hopeful now that after the contract gets allocated to the city council, and we're expecting it too, that we can now bring this issue to the table. And hopefully, at least at a pilot program, we can bring the body cameras to fruition in Lawrence. But to your point, again, forward thinking, years and years ago now, it's almost 2 years now since we applied for that grant and were awarded it. So we are trying to be ahead of the curve, and I wish we had them, because it would have been another one of those. Do you have them? Oh, yep, absolutely we do. At least we can say, we've tried to get them, and we did receive a grant for it. So I'm happy about that.
Chief Gray, I live in North Andover. I think you do a great job. I'm on Main Street. I look out my window at any I look out my window on any given day and I see a police cruiser sitting on Main Street or driving down Main Street. We feel very safe. Are you looking to go the way of Methuen and Lawrence? I know you're a town and it's a very different situation as far as putting up cameras. I remember calling you one day and saying, "Hey, I think there's a camera over there on 125 by China Blossom." I'm a civil libertarian. I don't want the police watching me. This was long before Lawrence put their cameras up. And I think at the time you said, no, that's just like a sensor so that the lights can go. But now here we are 5 years later, and other communities are actually putting cameras up and I don't want to say spying on their citizens, but certainly watching their citizens. Is that a direction North Andover is looking to go?
Before the chief can answer that, you're just let me just dispel a few things. We don't spy on anyone. The cameras aren't watched live. Actually, they're up in dispatch. So if something happened and we had a very serious purse snatching in the city where it was called in right away and someone was able to see that real time and give the officers good information that actually led to the arrest and recovery of the purse. And thankfully, the elderly woman wasn't seriously injured. But for the most part, those are reactive, sort of go back and investigative tools that we find out about a crime. Then the detectives go back and the patrol officers, for that matter, can go back and look at that and glean some information that will help them in their case. But we're not actively watching them. It'd be difficult to watch 200 cameras at any given time. But they've been a great tool. But there's no active spying, if you will, and they're all in central locations, intersections, things like that. Not really pointed at residences and things like that. I was just joking.
I didn't mean to necessarily put a negative connotation on that. I know there's positive and negative in everything we do. And as a civil libertarian, I kind of always lean toward maybe not doing stuff like that. But Chief,
Tom, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Because we were at 2, I thought we'd be done at 3. I booked myself, so I'm getting text messages.
How dare you?
I got to run out.
Well, you shouldn't have been late.
That
was these two guys.
So I got to head out. Sorry.
Why don't you give us, before you leave, your final thoughts on all this Black Lives Matter stuff, what's going on across the country, and how you're dealing with it locally?
Sure. So we're hoping, my personal opinion is that everything calms down a little bit, that we're going to continue, as Chief Vasque said, having that engagement with the public, because the truth is the trust you build and the goodwill you build is what makes us able to do what we do without having violent outbursts. So our doors are open to our community. We're going to continue to talk with them, and we're going to continue to build trust, and hopefully that we won't have another incident, or we won't have an incident, like that, and we're here to really serve those people that we work for, which is the public.
All right,
and thank you for having us. And sorry, guys, I got to run.
No worries. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
You have to blame these guys for being late. Actually, no, it was his fault because he put Zoom on the email.
He did.
We're not blaming anybody.
All right. That's fine.
So I'll address the legislature stuff. I've had nothing but support from the Board of Selectmen all the way up through the state reps. And in fact, one of them, I grew up with her, and she married one of my best friends. And she came to my office and we had a conversation, and she actually enlightened me on some of the issues that are at stake here that I didn't even know about. So it was a great back and forth. And I agree with Chief Vasque in that matter. As far as the cameras go, we do have cameras in North Andover, but they're in the places that you wouldn't expect. The high school, the middle school, the airport. Do we need to expand them? Again, show me a problem, and we'll talk about it. But again, like you said, on Main Street, there's police officers up and down there all day.
Right.
And not only that, but there's a lot of businesses out there on Main Street that have cameras. So when we've had crimes in the area, we actually go to the businesses and say, "Hey, did you get that on the footage?" Sure enough, yeah. We went to so-and-so, and they had the person driving up the street right after they hit somebody.
Right.
Okay, so a lot of the cameras are out there anyways. And ask any police officer now, whenever something is happening, 9 times out of 10, there's someone standing there like this.
Right.
And we're being recorded anyways. So everyone's used to being recorded. Everyone behaves as if, I was talking to a sergeant today, and he said, I always act as if I'm being recorded. And that's the mindset you have to have, though. You can't be doing things thinking you're going to get away with it. It's not happening anymore. As far as, considering it, Chief Ferrulo used to be the Woburn chief, and he's now head of the interim director of the Mass Training Council. And he made a great statement I'm going to steal. I'll give him credit for it, though. He said, show me the problem. Why do I need body cameras? What problem am I looking for? Am I looking for rudeness? Instead of spending $3 million on body cameras to fix rudeness, I'd rather spend $3 million on the problem.
Right.
And work on training and getting these officers better educated. And if it's a use of force issue, I'd rather spend $3 million on correcting that use of force issue through training and remediation and even termination if it's becoming that. So I kind of have that feeling and thought process about technology, because the biggest elephant in the room is who can get the body camera footage, what part of it's public record, how long do you have to keep it for, What happens if you lose some of it?
Right.
So it's a huge conundrum on our end, and I've talked to the IT as far as where are we going with this? Like, what's our game plan as far as storage? What's our game plan as far as implementation? I think right now we're going to take a step back and just keep doing what we're doing, like the chief said, building that trust, rebuilding the trust, and doing our job and making our community happy.
We're up against time. Some final thoughts on what's going on across the country, the ambushes on police officers, how difficult that makes your job going forward. Just some final thoughts for people.
So certainly we don't want to see something like that happen, and obviously it's disgusting, just like the George Floyd incident was disgusting. Any sort of, attacks unprovoked on police officers is disgusting. Two wrongs don't make a right, and all of that sort of thing. So we don't want to see anything like that happen here or there, for that matter. Again, we'll go back to my original statement about movements and things of that nature. We have no problem with people wanting to have a conversation. We would really hope that we're part of the conversation, and really I think we can get somewhere if we're part of the conversation. Let's tone down the yelling and screaming, and let's have an actual conversation in a room, or multiple conversations, which I've been having, on Zoom meetings and things like that with different groups. I would hope that we can continue doing that. Use this as an opportunity to engage the community, engage groups that want to ask questions. And I can tell you, more times than not, they walk away with, "Wow, I didn't know that." Some of the examples that I gave you earlier and things of that nature. So I would hope that they would realize that we don't want to see that happen either. We don't want our officers to behave that way. We don't believe in that. When we saw that, it was disgusting, and that we would hope that we're on the same team, making our respective communities better. And again, our hope is that we're part of the conversation. Our hope is that we can continue bonding with our community and make it better.
Chief Gray, final words on all of this Black Lives Matter stuff, how difficult it's making policing and putting you guys under the gun?
Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. And bad actors that have done things that they shouldn't have done, I don't like the fact that good officers are being ambushed and targeted. But again, it comes down to the marketing. We have to market ourselves to the public and let them know what we're doing. We have to do a better job to let them know that, just like Chief Vasque said, let's have a conversation. Let's let you know firsthand what's happening. And then if you have something you can educate me on, by all means, let me know. So I can say, you know what, I didn't think of it that way. I should put myself in that position, have some empathy, and say, okay, I get that. So it's two-way conversation, two-way street, and we need to, be better every day.
Thank you, Chief Roy Vasque from Lawrence, Chief Charles Gray from North Andover, and Chief Joe Solomon from Methuen, who just left because we did start a little late. I want to thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
I don't know if we're going to do another year-end thing to talk about opioids, but if you guys are willing to do that again in December, I'm happy to have you back.
Sure.
I have tremendous respect for all three of you. I don't always agree with all three of you. In fact, there are times when I bang my head up against the desk when I see some of the decisions that you make. But I think that just goes to how good of police chiefs you are, that people can disagree with you and not be calling for your heads. I'm always frightened when someone says they agree with me 100%. Like after a show, I'll get hate mail, and one person will say, "I agree with 100% of everything you said," and then there's something wrong with you, because you can't agree with anybody 100%.
True.
I want to thank our sponsors, McLennan Real Estate. If you want to buy a house or sell a house, give Matt, McLennan, Sam, Janet, anybody over there a call. We love McLennan Real Estate in Methuen. They also help us with our TMF Family Dinner for the Homeless, which I know the chief loves that organization. I know you guys always behind us, and I appreciate that. I'm only half sarcastic about that because he actually does support helping Coronum and the homeless in other ways. AFC Urgent Care, we love Lisa Williams. We are going to have her back on maybe in the end of August to talk about how everything with COVID-19 has changed. It is changing. It's changing significantly. The testing is changing, the type of testing, the longevity of testing. So we will have her back. And EIS Investigations and Training, we appreciate them coming on board and sponsoring the show. I know I'm going to get some heat in Methuen for that, but I'm never going to turn down a check. I don't care who's writing it. So anybody that wants to sponsor this program, it's $50 a week. We'd love to have you on board. We'll put your logo and stuff on the front of the news desk, and we'll talk about you throughout the show. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. I hope all of you guys will stay safe. I hope all of your men and women that serve under you stay safe, and we'd love to have you back.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thanks. Just roll that up, Melvin Taylor. Next week, we've got, what do we have next week? I think do we have Nick DeZaglio next week? Let me take a look. Melvin Taylor says we got to go home, but you got to hold on for one more second. Let's see. Next week we've got Joe Silverio from 4-Star Lighting will be here, and we're going to try and get somebody else on. The following week we're going to have Nick DeZoglio from the Methuen City Council, and who would have ever thought Nick DeZoglio would turn out to be the voice of reason on the Methuen City Council? Boy, during those debates, never in a million years would I have guessed that, but he certainly has turned out to be doing a good job, and we're going to have him here on the 30th. And then in August, our August 7th show, we're going to have Neil Perry back. I'm glad to see that he's feeling a little bit better. And I know that it's going to be a long road to recovery, but we're happy that he's going to be okay. Melvin Taylor says we got to go home, so go home already. Thank you, Ben Kitchen, our fine producer, and Dave Garafalo for putting up with our baloney here for the last 3 or 4 years.